Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim. This is another Real Ideal Gear review, and today we're reviewing the Invicta ProDiver Automatic. Pretty common watch. This is one that I was curious about. Now, I've previously purchased an Invicta ProDiver quartz movement, and it's what we call in our family the Seer trophy because it's Viking colors, purple and gold. So I bought it more as a joke, but the more I looked at that watch, I was like, wait a minute. Invicta, this is the black sheep of dive watches on YouTube. So I better check this out because I'm not so sure it's a black sheep of watches for me. Because I kind of like the Invicta that I had before that is now traveling between my family as far as who has the best guessing skills for Viking games, Minnesota Viking scores. So anyway, that's the impetus for me getting into this Invicta strain of watches. So I picked one up. Overall impressions are really good. We're going to go through the 5 typical things that we go through on this watch, which are size, fitment, finish, accuracy, and then legibility and loom. And then we'll talk about uses and recommendations and the overall pros and overall cons of the watch. So as far as the size goes, this is a typical dive watch size, 40 millimeter case diameter, 20 millimeters between the lugs. And you also have a 14.5 millimeter height off the wrist, which is a little bit tall. Part of it, I think, might be due because it has a display case back, and that adds a little bit more height to the watch off the wrist. So be careful of that. It's a 14.5 millimeter. So if you're someone who likes to keep it down below 14, this is actually a significant height above 14 millimeters, 14.5. So keep that in mind. For me, it's a little bit tall, but there's no NATO strap involved. You're not raising it even higher because of the strap, that kind of thing. So I'm okay with it, but it's on the border of getting pretty tall. The crown itself is a perfect sized crown. It's for my fingers. I kind of have the meaty fingers because of the work that I'm doing right now outdoors. I can grab the crown. It's grippy. It's a big enough crown where I can get a hold of it and pull it out, unscrew it, pull it out, and manipulate the time as needed. So I like the size of the crown. Overall fitment, this is a pin link adjustment system. So take the pin out, you can adjust the links, get yourself close. You have 4 micro adjusts, 3 that are actually available to you because 1 is always being used. So to me, 3 is the minimum. This is I think the perfect setup. And so the overall fitment of this watch is really, really good. I like the way I can micro adjust this watch as necessary. I can get it pretty close to perfect when it comes down to resting, wrist size, working wrist size, and heat, cold, that whole thing when your wrist size changes with some of those activities. So I really like the fitment of this watch an awful lot. Finish. Great finish. This is where this watch shines, really, literally shines. There's polish, there's brush. You have brush on the top case. You have polish on the side case. You have polish between the links. You have polish on the outside links of the bracelet. You have polish on the outside edges of the bracelet. So there's a lot of polish on the bezel. I mean, there's a lot going on here when it comes down to just some of the reflectivity of the watch when it comes to light. So this lends itself a little bit being more of a dressier watch than a tool watch. I think this is a watch that's probably not suitable for the kind of stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis, but after work's over, there's a lot of opportunities to wear a watch like this. If you're working in an office, I think there's a lot of opportunities. I'm kind of jumping into the uses section, but you get the idea that polish really lends itself to being a little bit more dressy. There's a little bit too much writing on the dial. I think there's too much at the 6 o'clock position, and it's really hard to read. When I use the glasses, I can read it, but even then, the text is so small, it's hard. Like, why put the text in there? Just take the whole thing out. But it's there. It's not a huge ding at all, but it's one of those things that's like, don't need to have that there. The display case back, I love that, but there's no color on the rotor. When I look at some of the other Invictas online, they have the NH35, and the rotor is yellow. This one is not yellow. It's silver. It's very plain. So you've got a display case back for, showing just regular steel parts or metal parts back there. So not real thrilling if you ask me, but the display case back is a nice touch. Excellent crown. It's grippy. Like I said, it has the logo on the end of the crown. It has a mineral crystal. This is one of the things I always remind folks when it comes down to the height off the wrist and what kind of crystal is on top. Because the taller the watch is off the wrist, the more you want to lean towards or hope that you can purchase or pick up a watch that has a sapphire crystal. This has a mineral crystal. It's a $75 watch. You're not going to, keep your expectations in check with what the cost of the watch is. So just keep in mind it's a taller watch with the mineral crystal, more likely to scratch. Stainless steel bezel, high polish on the outside edge of the bezel. The grippiness of the bezel is pretty bad, actually. It's pretty slippery for what it is. I have a hard time grabbing it and turning it because it's so slick. Even though you have some of the cuts on the bezel to give you some grip, they're just not sharp enough. They're actually kind of dull or rounded over and polished. It's a polished bezel, so therefore it's just hard to grab that bezel and turn it. And if I remember right, it's harder to turn than my prior Invicta ProDiver quartz, the Sear Trophy, the purple and gold watch, which, by the way, it's on my review if you want to take a look at that one. I really like that watch a lot. It's a quartz movement, so grab and go type setup, and it's very accurate, so I like that one a lot. This is an automatic. Overall, the finish on this watch, I really like the finish, and I think it does a great job. The handset inside inside the case is a great handset. We all know where it comes from, but the thing that I think is important for this watch and just other watches in general is the hour hand differentiates itself from the minute hand, and the minute hand obviously differentiates itself from the second hand. So all three of these hands are very different from each other, so it's easy to index, easy to understand which hand is doing what with a very quick glance. So I really like the handset as well. Let's talk a little bit about accuracy. NH35 movement, reliable Seiko movement. This is not an issue. As far as regulating, if you want to do it on your own, this is an easy watch to work with when it comes down to the movement. So sometimes at a price point like this, you're looking at an off-brand movement or you're looking at a quartz movement, but this is a Seiko movement NH35, which is kind of a head scratcher because when you look online for even purchasing just the movement, it's like $30. It's almost half the cost of this watch. So whatever they've done for the rest, they're making a profit on it somehow. But anyway, it's not through the movement. The movement, I think they're just bare bones on that. But the accuracy is well within spec, so it's fine. And I'll check it again later. And I've only had one watch so far that I've had to go back and regulate, and that was actually an ST 1901 movement. So the Seiko movements, I haven't had to go back and regulate or adjust for seconds per day that they're off. And so far, they're all within spec. I don't play around with them too much. Again, this is something to keep in mind. If you're rotating watches, it's probably not as important to have a super accurate watch at that point, just accurate enough, because you're going to swap the watch out the next day or 2 days later, and that accumulation of error is not going to matter. So keep that in mind when it comes down to, how sensitive should you be towards the difference of seconds per day on a watch. And for me, it's really not a big factor until you get into that 15 to 20 plus range, and then it's like, well, I need to open the case back up and start regulating this one. Legibility and Loom, very legible watch. Dark dial, you have the lighter indices, you have a light handset, great contrast, easy to read. I would say that the hour markers are a little bit on the small side. The 12, 6, and 9 could be a little bit bigger. Not necessarily, the small round hour markers, but the triangle and the two rectangular batons for the 12, 6, and 9 really should be a little bit bigger. It almost seems a little bit too small for the size of the dial. So the proportions there is just not quite right. I do love the Cyclops magnifier over the date. I have the reading glasses, so I'm wearing a Cyclops, so to speak, but when I'm not wearing these, it's a great feature. And so when I was out using this mowing, and I'll show you some video, I can see the date no problem. I can read the dial no problem. It's very, very legible watch to read. One of the most legible watches that I've had because of the Cyclops. So I really like the Cyclops for that reason. For those that don't, I don't know if it's because they don't have reading glasses yet or not, but I appreciate that a lot. Loom. Loom is below average, almost poor. I got about 7 minutes or so of decent Loom where you could read the time, and it got to the point where you could tell like this is just not going to be very legible in the very low light or dark settings. So I would say it's below average to poor, somewhere in that range. It does have some Loom, and it lasts again 7, 8, 9 minutes maybe. That's pretty good, but it's definitely not an all-night Loom setup at all. And again, $75, keep everything in check. So overall, this watch has, I think, a great finish, great handset. It has the colorway that I like. I love the bezel color, the kind of deep red with the black dial. You've got some polish edges around all of the hour markers. You've got a great handset with some polishing on there. You've got polish and brush on the case and on the bracelet. Bracelet's easy to adjust, pin link system. You've got 4 micro adjust, 3 that you have available to make it really fit perfect on your wrist. A lot of great things about this watch. Some of the things I'm not really that impressed with, it's the bezel. The bezel is just too slippery to manipulate, and I do use the bezel. I'm timing things here and there. It's amazing, like when you pay attention to what things you keep track time of, the timing bezel actually can help with those things. So I think that's one of the significant dings. The mineral crystal, yeah, you know, it's a $75 watch, so you got to be careful. Like that's pretty much how it's going to be. But when you combine a $75 watch with a mineral crystal with a 14.5 millimeter height, you're setting yourself up for potential scratches on this. So you got to be really careful about where you use a watch like this with that kind of a setup. So for the bracelet, you have a pressed clasp, and there's another piece that's like, it's not preferable, but it does match up with a $75 watch. So it's not out of line. It's just something to be aware of. It's lower quality, but it still works fine. One of the things I don't like about this clasp, it has a double clasp, a safety clasp, and a regular clasp, but they're friction set. So that means that there's a little bent piece of metal that goes around a bar, basically, and the friction is what holds it in place. Over time, they tend to wear, they tend to stretch a little bit, not close quite as much, and so you just have to bend it a little bit towards the bar, and it adds a little more friction, and it's totally fine. But just keep in mind, that's the system that they're using. It's okay, it works. Again, $75. So what would be the uses for something like this? You know, you could use it for the work, like for me, outdoor labor work where I'm using lawn mowing equipment and trimming and doing shrubs and things like that. I could definitely use this watch for that. It probably isn't the best setup for it. It's probably not being fair to the watch as far as the amount of polish that's on there. It just, I don't know, it doesn't work that way. However, it's a cheap watch. So if you're going to use it for a work situation, that's not a bad idea. So there's the give and take in that whole thing. So I don't think I'd use it for work. I'd probably use it more for casual. It's a cool looking watch. That's what it's for. It has that look of a very expensive watch, if you know what I mean. So I'd probably keep it for that. Casual use, semi-formal use, date nights, those kind of things, office work. If you have an office job, this would be a great watch for that. Professional settings like that. Education. I was in education for a while. I think this would be a great watch. People may misconstrue what teachers make when you come walking in with a watch that has, you know, that familiar look to it. But at the same time, who cares? If it's a watch you like to wear the watch. All right. So I think it's probably not the manual labor type setup for that. So overall score for this watch is a 9.2 out of 10. There's a few things that don't work out for it, but remember, this is a $75 watch. Do I recommend it? Absolutely, I recommend this watch. There's just a few things I'm not really pleased about as far as the overall design, but it does a great job. So there you go. That's the review for the Invicta ProDiver Automatic with the Seiko NH35 movement in there. I think it's a great watch. It's a recommend, 9.2 out of 10. My name's Tim. This has been a Real Ideal Gear Review. We'll catch you guys next time. It's kind of how it comes as far as, you know, what you're paying for it. You have a pressed clasp for the